all you beautiful people out there. Sorry about that. I wasn't planning on yawning at that particular moment, but you got me in the middle of a yawn. What can I say? Alrighty. So, anyway, I can read again. Yay! All right. So going back to Rabbi Tovia Singer's book, by the way, Rabbi's father died, and so my condolences to the rabbi, should he ever watch this channel. All right. So Judaism and Original Sin is the chapter we're dealing with today. And it comes from Let's Get Biblical, Volume 2. Question: does the Jewish faith have a teaching comparable to that of original sin in Christianity? By this, I mean the teaching that all humans are born with the innate tendency to disobey God. In my particular Christian tradition, water baptism is required for the removal of this sin. Would you please comment? Okay. So before I get into the rabbi's reply, not all Christian traditions believe in original sin. I know the Mormons do not. And not all Christian traditions believe water baptism is a must. Now, the Catholics do. In fact, the Catholics believe in baby baptism. The baby's born, and I never was Catholic, so anybody who was or is Catholic can comment. How many days is it since the baby's born that they are sprinkled with water? If a person becomes Catholic later on in their life, then my understanding is that they'll have their confirmation and then their sprinkling. They're not immersed even as an adult. Other Christian traditions, they are immersed. In some traditions, water baptism is a must. In other traditions, it's optional, but it is encouraged. So, anyway, so let's see what the rabbi's answer to this question is. So, the Jewish scriptures do not have this term original sin. And I'm paraphrasing here. The church's teachings on this are antithetical to the principles of Torah and the prophets. Your comment that your Christian denomination, hang on here, my eyes changed since I've had my cataract surgery. So so I have to hold the book at a different distance than I did before my cataract surgery. So sometimes I have to adjust it. So I apologize. So your denomination's teaching that water baptism is essential for the removal of sin may rattle the sensitivities of more Christians than anything I'll say. Your question, hang on. My hands aren't very my hands are shaking. So I have to readjust the book ever so often. All right. You have raised a number of important issues that must be addressed. Before answering, however, I will explain that the doctrine on original sin, for those who've not been raised in the church. So I'll just go over it just in case somebody doesn't know what original sin is. All right, let me adjust this. It's kind of hard adjusting to how far you have to hold a book. You don't really think about it until you have to. According to church teachings, when our first parents sinned, there was a catastrophic spiritual consequence for everyone. More importantly, the church holds that these effects extend beyond painful childbirth and laborious farming conditions outlined in Genesis 3. So remember, those are the only two conditions that God said would happen: painful childbirth and laborious farming conditions. And of course, that they would die. The doctrine of original sin posits that Adam and Eve rebelled against God, and as a result, all their descendants became infected with their transgression. As a consequence, man is hopelessly lost in a state of sin, which he has been held captive since the fall. He is powerless to follow the path of obedience and righteousness by his own free will. Because all are born with this stain, man can do nothing to merit his own salvation. It is totally depraved, and true free will is far beyond his grasp. Totally depraved may seem to be a harsh way for a Christian doctrine to depict mankind's condition, yet this is precisely the term in which the church describes man's desperate, sinful predicament. And this is also the way that Calvinism describes it. That's not in his book, but that's my 2 cents worth. In your question, the doctrine of original sin teaches that all human beings are born with an innate tendency to disobey God. While superficially correct, the statement fails to convey the far-reaching scope of the church's doctrine. Christianity does teach that the human race is born with an evil inclination, encompasses a far more extreme position than the one that you outlined. In fact, missionaries insist that as a result of the fall, man's unquenchable desire for sin is virtually ungovernable. Man is not just inclined towards sin, but more accurately, a slave to sin. Paul says this on numerous occasions in his letters. There's good reason for the church's uncompromising stance on this. All right. So I'm going to talk on my own here for a bit. Yes, he is correct. There's a very good reason that the church hammers this home. And that is, if man is totally depraved, he can do nothing to own his own salvation, then man is entirely dependent on the church to get him to Jesus Christ, and from there to get him to God. Okay? That's basically it. It's self-interest. Is all it is. It's self-interest. If righteousness can be achieved through submission to the commandments outlined in Torah, what possible benefit could Jesus' death provide for mankind? True. Such self-probing thoughts, however, were unimaginable to those who shaped Christian theology. But there are several people in the Bible, even people in the New Testament, think Elizabeth and Zachariah, the parents of John the Baptist, who were described as righteous. Okay? But the church don't want you to think that you can be righteous on your own. Why would you need them? And more importantly, why would you need Jesus? So you need the church to get to Jesus. And you need Jesus to get to God. But if you don't need Jesus, you don't need the church. Okay. Despite this position that the missionaries take, this Christian doctrine of original sin is hostile to the central teachings of Jewish scripture. Torah loudly condemns the alien teachings that man is unable to freely choose good over evil, life over death. This is not a hidden or ambiguous message in the Jewish scriptures. In Deuteronomy, I think, I'm not going to look it up. It says, before you I have placed good and evil, life and death, therefore choose life. So I don't believe in God, okay? But if you do believe in God, right? Why would God say, I choose before you good and evil, life and death, therefore choose life? Why would he say that if you couldn't choose good and couldn't choose life? All right, moving on. In an extraordinary sermon delivered by Moses in the last days of his life, The prophet stands before the entire nation and condemns the nation. The man's condition is hopeless. Throughout this exhortation, Moses declared that it is man alone who can and must merit his own salvation. As he unhesitatingly speaks in the name of God, he excoriates the notion that obedience to the Almighty is too difficult or far off. The 30th chapter of Deuteronomy discusses this matter, and its verses read as though the Torah is bracing the Jewish people for Christianity. Okay, I think this passage is where it's in. All right. If you will hearken to the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, if you turn unto the Lord thy God with all your heart and with all your soul, for this commandment which I command you this day is not too hard for you, neither is it too far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who shall go up for us to heaven to bring it to us, and make us hear it, that we may do it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who shall go over the sea and bring it unto us, and make us to hear it, that we may do it. The word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. Okay, that one's Deuteronomy 30, 10 through 14. That is not the passage I was thinking of. Okay. So Moses is saying here, you can do it. And according to the Jews, he's a prophet of God. So that means according to the Christians, he should be a prophet of God too, right? So was Moses lying when he said, you can do it? Kind of makes you think, huh? This problem didn't escape the attention of Paul. You don't want to know what I think of Paul. Most people who have been to my channel numerous times know what I think of Paul. All right. So he constructed his most consequential doctrine on the premise that man is utterly depraved and incapable of saving himself through his own obedience to God. Chapter after chapter directs his Gentile audience toward the cross and away from Sinai. Employing unparalleled literary manipulations, Paul manages to conceal the theological problem with a swipe of his well-worn eraser. Paul's innovative approach to Bible tampering was so stunning that it would set the standard of scriptural revisionism for the New Testament authors that would follow. And might I add, Paul was the first New Testament author. Okay. Matthew might come first in the New Testament that we have now, but the author of Matthew was not the first to write. Paul was. You can ask any New Testament scholar, from the evangelical of the evangelicals to the secular New Testament scholars. All right. A classic example of this revisionism can be found in Romans 10:8. Paul proclaims he is quoting directly from Scripture, from Deuteronomy 30:14. Yet as he approaches the last portion of this verse, he stops short of the Torah's vital conclusion and expunges the remaining segment of this crucial verse. In the book of Romans, Paul writes, "But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart." That is the word of faith which we preach, which is Romans 10:8, which is not what Deuteronomy says. Okay. Because if Paul had said that you may do it, which Deuteronomy 30:14 does say, well, then he'd have a real problem on his hands. And, well, we can't have that, can we? Because Paul, well, he's creating his own religion. And after all, nobody's going to go to the Hebrew Bible to see what the Hebrew Bible says, because to the people he's writing to, well, most of them aren't literate anyway, and I'm not being nasty to the people of the first century. It was just what it was back then. Most people weren't literate. And even if they were literate, they probably weren't literate in Hebrew, so they probably would never know. You know? Go for a little bit longer. The question that immediately comes to mind is, why would Paul remove a vital clause from Moses' message? Although both Paul and Matthew quoted extensively from the Jewish scriptures, it is for this reason that they achieved a dramatically different result. Paul largely ministered to a Gentile audience who were completely ignorant of the Jewish scriptures. As a result, they did not possess the skills necessary to discern between genuine Judaism and Bible tampering. The writer on Matthew, on the other hand, directed much of his evangelism toward the Jewish people. The Jews, however, were well aware that the writer of Matthew was manipulating the scriptures. As a result, the first gospel completely failed to reach the Jewish audience for which it was written. The people of Israel grasped that the author of Matthew was willfully corrupting their scriptures, and so as a result, not a whole lot of Jews converted to Christianity. You know, that's where I'm going to stop for today. But I will say the Jesus movement was wholly a Jewish movement. he wasn't Jesus, if he existed. I don't know. I don't care. Wasn't really preaching anything contrary to the Jewish scriptures, unless you want to say that he claimed to be the Son of God, which, I mean, who knows? You know, we're talking about people writing that. Paul never knew the guy, okay? First of all. But second of all, when we're talking about the Gospels, we're talking about books that were anonymously written that were not claimed to have been written by eyewitnesses. And thirdly, that were written well after the events they claim to be about. So, we have no idea what Jesus said. We have no idea if what the Gospels say he said, he really said. We have no idea. Okay? That's just what it is. If you want to go ahead and believe that he said all the shit that the Gospels say he said, go ahead. I ain't going to stop you. You know, just leave the rest of us alone, and I'll be good with that. Believe what you want. Just don't shove it down other people's throats, you know? Because I don't give a shit what you believe. Unless it hurts other people, you know? But then you're shoving it down other people's throats, you know? I don't care. Believe what you want. Let other people believe what they want. It's all good, you know? So, anyway, so yeah, I think I'll, go. It was my first foray into reading since I've had my cataract surgery. And, you know, I'm still trying to get the gist of where I need to hold the book, because, it's changed since I've had my cataract surgery. If you ever have cataract surgery, that's one thing you're going to have to adjust to, is how far do you hold the book now? But, you know, it's all good. At least I can see again. So you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. It's 5:30 here, 5:30 a.m. here in Oregon. And, you know, I will see you guys later. And, we're going to have a bumpy ride. Anyway, thanks for coming. Cuss and Discuss down below. I got that from Tibby Gibson, by the way. Go check out his channel. It's great. I like it. I like him a lot. You know, he used to be a holy roller preacher. And you can tell. You can tell he used to be a holy roller preacher. But anyway, yeah, it's Tibby Gibson. But he didn't tell me to tell you that, by the way. I'm just saying, you know, he's now an agnostic atheist like I am. So anyway, love you guys. Bye.